All right, everyone, I believe it is about that time. Hello, welcome to today's webinar. We're excited that you're joining us for this presentation on food safety for small food operators, getting started with the Fundamentals Verification Assessment Program. A quick overview of our agenda for today. We'll start off with some introductions. Then we'll introduce you to the FVA program with the why, what, and how of this program. And then we'll get an update on how the program's been going, followed by Q&A at the end. My name is Jonathan Lackey. I'm the U.S. Business Development Manager for SQFI and your host for today's webinar. I'm delighted to be joined by a team of experts from EAGLE Certification Group. We have with us today Colin Christmas, their Managing Director, Jessica Osborne, Chief Program Officer, Kaylor Schuttinger, Senior Business Development Manager, and Chris DeMello, Senior Certification Manager. At this point in the presentation, I'd like to give you a brief overview of the Fundamentals Verification Assessment Program, or FVA, as we like to call it. First off, why did we develop this program? I love this program because it gives me an opportunity to interact with a group of people I greatly admire and envy. Entrepreneurs, the proverbial man or woman in the arena, as goes the famous Teddy Roosevelt speech. Founders of these small food businesses are risking their time and resources to bring their products to the market to delight their customers. But often, these very small businesses are not fully aware of another risk that they are taking, the risk of a food safety incident. So we developed this program in partnership with EAGLE Certification Group and Whole Foods to create a cost-effective program to help bridge this knowledge gap and provide assurance to retailers of the capability of these small suppliers to recognize and control their food safety risks. While most third-party food safety audit programs involved a qualified auditor taking the time to travel to a site to inspect and review their food safety program, the FVA program takes a different approach. After a company performs a thorough self-assessment to our food safety standard, a qualified assessor then reviews their work and performs a remote or online half-day assessment of the operation. One limitation is that this program is only eligible to food manufacturers meeting the definition of a qualified facility or a very small business under the FDA's Food Safety Modernization Act. While the formal definition can be somewhat complicated, in short, this definition requires that a company to have less than $1 million for a 3-year average of sales plus the value of inventory. At this time, we'd like to share this short clip with you with some thoughts from Carrie Allen, SQF's Vice President for Business Development and Strategy.
And we believe that this program will really be very helpful to small suppliers and for the industry in general to help build knowledge and competencies and establishing those food safety practices early from the start, because then you can build on a strong foundation as you grow and scale, and you know what you need to do as you're adding maybe new products, scaling up to a larger facility, or looking to work with partners who may be in the future manufacturing your product for you. So establishing that knowledge early is extremely important. We think this program is a great opportunity for that.
So how does it work? As I mentioned before, the FVA program begins with a self-assessment to either the SQF Fundamentals Basic or Intermediate Food Safety Codes. By the way, these codes, as well as audit checklists and other guidance documents, are available for free to download from our website. Once the self-assessment has been completed, a qualified assessor will then review the results of the self-assessment. A remote online meeting is then scheduled to discuss and resolve any concerns identified during the review. Part of the online meeting is a visual tour of the facility, giving the assessor the opportunity to see an operation in production and demonstrate their food safety programs in action. I had the pleasure to shadow one of these meetings a few months ago, and I was truly impressed with how well organized and prepared the site was, as well as the assessor's ability to ask insightful questions and really challenge their food safety program. Any corrective actions identified during this meeting are then issued. And then, once the manufacturer has resolved these corrective actions to the assessor's satisfaction, a verification declaration, not a certificate, is issued to the site. And this verification declaration is valid for 1 year. At this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Colin Christmas with EAGLE Certification Group for an update on how the program's been going since we launched it about a year ago. Colin?
Thanks very much, John. I appreciate the why, the what, and the how, because I think that's really important. We really identified a need in the market for some of these very small businesses to really enter and scale. And that's why our partnership with SQF was really important. And so a like-minded retailer that's working with local suppliers that are very small businesses it was a great partner as well. So we did the pilot in 2023, and so since October last year, we've been actually running with a full program, and I'd just like to give you an update. And just go to the next slide, John. So really what's different, John touched upon this, and it's a little bit of a paradigm shift in some ways, because I think everyone in the audience today is very familiar with a GMP audit or an audit from SQF or a GFSI recognized audit. And now we're talking very carefully around the words assessor and assessment, really because this is a different proposal. And what does that really mean? It means that we are going in and working with very small businesses and performing an assessment of their work. It's their internal audit and it's their self-assessment that we're looking at as a third-party verification. And as John mentioned, it's not a certificate. It's actually a letter of declaration. So here's a good table as a comparison, especially for the organizations that's more familiar with SQF Fundamentals, which is an on-site audit, which is typically 1 day. There's an audit report, there's a certificate, and then SQF. So anyone that's familiar with SQF, it's a full on-site audit, it's 2 or more days, full audit report and a certificate. Whereas with the FVA, it's a remote assessment. It takes half a day. We are verifying the work that's been done by the very small business. The audit report is somewhat different as well. It's an executive summary to explain whether the organization's interpretation of making safe food is the correct interpretation. If the assessor believes that the site has made a good interpretation for their internal audit or self-assessment, then a letter of declaration is issued. So it's not certification. And I think that's a good summary here. And what does that mean then? So what does this remote verification actually do? So just to break that down into some steps, high level, so you can understand this, because this is what we've really been explaining to the organizations that's been partnering with us on their journey over the last 6 to 9 months. So they start with the self-assessment. It's an SQF Fundamentals. It's either basic or intermediate. And then we come in as a third party to do the independent review for accuracy. We start looking at their documentation. We come in and we do a virtual tour. We do a virtual inspection of the facility. And then the assessor has the ability, if there is an incorrect interpretation by the site or the very small business, or if there's a gap, the assessor will still raise corrective actions very similar to an audit, and there'll be some guidance that's provided along with that. And then finally, if the site is successful in meeting the requirements that the assessor has set out in terms of there is ability to make safe food, the decision is not a certificate, but it's a verification declaration. So instead of an audit, we're talking about verification and an assessment here. So what does the plan look like? We said it's half a day. Really, when we say half a day, it varies between 4 hours to 6 hours. On average, what we have been seeing for the last 6 to 9 months, it's about 5.5 hours we're seeing on average. So it's a little bit more than half a day, but it could be 4 hours if everything went completely smoothly. And as we know, as food safety professionals, things rarely go smoothly. So we have allocated additional time where applicable. So we start with an introductory phone call. It's about 30 minutes. So the assessor gets to understand the organization, who they are and where they are in their food safety journey. That then is followed by a preparatory documentation review. It's about 60 minutes to make sure that their documents and documentation is in order. So that's done up front. Then we have an online meeting with the organization. That's about 10 to 15 minutes with the opening meeting, followed by a virtual tour. The virtual tour is between 45 and 75 minutes. So we do put a lot of emphasis on this. And a lot of people say, is it possible to do a virtual inspection compared to an on-site inspection? Well, it's not as comprehensive as maybe an on-site, but it's also with the technology today, we believe that we can actually identify the right set of criteria that the organization is or is not making safe food through that tour. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into the Q&A. Then there's two parts. It's not a full audit, so we are not looking at every single thing that is on the SQF fundamentals. We have some mandatory requirements. What is absolutely critical that the assessor needs to look at? And they will spend 30 to 90 minutes on what we have defined as the mandatory requirements that are non-negotiables. Now, the second part is based on sampling. Depending on what the assessor, the assessor in this case, is looking at, they will look and sample for the rest of the requirements. And that allows a full set of requirements that maybe in an audit would take a full day, is actually broken down into half a day. And as I mentioned before, that's because it's a verification. It's not a full audit, as we've mentioned earlier on. Finally, there's the closing meeting, which is 10 to 15 minutes. And then there's time allocated to the assessor to write up their executive summary and write up their NCRs. And then at the end, there's a full review of the non-conformance, the corrective action review that takes about 30 minutes. And then the other common questions we've had when we've launched this program is what categories are applicable for SQF verification assessment. So here they are. I'm not going to read them all out, but they are in the documentation that's available with this presentation. So this is within the documentation provided by SQF. So there's a full set of requirements here. Here's the second page to have a look at the full set of categories. You'll receive this presentation after today's webinar. And then finally, I wanted to show a short video from Roger Roweth, who is our Chief Technical Officer. He's been our primary assessor and been very much part of the development of this program. And it's good to hear some words from Roger to understand what he thinks of the program so far.
We were able to share some best practices and kind of got into some teaching mode sometime during the assessment. And they got a lot of benefit from that. And they also got a lot of benefit from the findings that I had. And again, that was rewarding for myself. And that's kind of what made me a good proponent for the program now, because I felt like I was making a difference. They just were very appreciative of the time and the comments that I had during the assessment.
So some important words from Roger, really, and I think it kind of sums up the program. We're interacting with very small businesses, and they're typically at the beginning of their food safety journey, and ultimately, as the first bullet point that I see here is a barrier to entry, which is market entry, which is cost. This is a challenge for these small businesses. We know the ability to get into the food industry, the ability to partner with a national or a global retailer such as Whole Foods is quite a challenge. And when retailers like Whole Foods, they have whole teams of foragers, they call them foragers, to go out and identify these very small businesses that are, one, very innovative, providing, in a lot of cases, highly nutritious food and very creative ideas and new ideas to the food industry, which is very much where the customer is very interested in. And as we mentioned before, there's a belief that buying locally is an important thing in terms of many things, whether it's food security and all the other things that come with that. So one of the benefits is we are helping these small businesses get through their first step of their journey. So the cost thing is huge for the small businesses. Second thing is assessor capacity. We talk a lot in our industry about auditor capacity, and we say that there's never enough food auditors to actually perform all the audits that's demanded in our industry today. Or in a lot of cases, if we look at North America, an auditor may lose 2 days of travel to go out and do maybe a one-day GMP audit. So in some cases, they can do maybe 2 GMP audits a week, or if they do an SQF audit, there's 2 or 3 days, they can do 1 per week. So there's a lot of time lost with travel, and there's a lot of cost associated with travel as well. So in this case, for the very small businesses model, we look at the assessor capacity, and 5 of these can be executed in 1 week. And also for the assessor, it's very attractive because if these assessments are 4 to 6 hours, you have the ability to not be writing up audit reports either at the crack of dawn or very late at night to actually get all of their tasks done. So we think that capacity thing is very much a key benefit for the assessors or the auditors. The other thing that comes up is geographic location. We have suppliers in very remote places. As I mentioned, with travel, it could take a 4-hour drive from the nearest airport to get to a small business. So how does a small business get audited without absorbing a huge amount of costs? And the auditors choose not to go to these locations because it's too much a hassle. So these small businesses tend to not be able to enter the market. So as we see now, the geographic location becomes very important, and a remote assessment with the right technology can be beneficial here. And then finally, last but not least, as we mentioned, there's retailers and there's brand owners out there who are tuning in with the concept of local and local suppliers. And for those suppliers and those brand owners and those retailers who are choosing to work with local suppliers, they are typically small businesses. And with that customer appeal and demand and the mindset of the retailer, such as Whole Foods, and there are many others, they need a solution for their supplier verification programs. Whereas the supplier may not be able to go through a GMP audit, they can do the remote assessment to get up and running on their food safety journey. And with that, I'm going to hand you back over to John, who's been collecting some testimonials.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, so we have a couple of great testimonials from companies who have gone through the program. So bear with me as I read these to you, but I feel that they're very important because they encapsulate the customer's journey and their experience with this program. Cam Loyett, co-founder of Honeymoon Chocolate, says that the program was easy and set us up for success with future SQF assessments. We were very nervous that our procedures were not adequate, as this was our first third-party assessment separate from the FDA and St. Louis City. I am thankful EAGLE was so willing to accommodate us with scheduling as well. Our assessor was very forthcoming with our current process and minor changes needed to be made. Thank you. What a great testimonial. Todd Kopit, co-founder of Alchemy Food, says, we had a great experience with EAGLE working through our SQF Basic program. Our assessor worked with us ahead of the assessment to ensure we were up to speed and to facilitate a highly efficient assessment process. We were thrilled to have an option like this as a small business in a rural location. highlighting Colin's comments earlier about, you know, the importance of being able to access a rural facility. Continuing on, nothing but positive notes from us. Great. And then last, we have Denise Wheel, co-founder of Damn Good English Muffins. This is the assessment that I was able to shadow. Very impressed. Our experience working with EAGLE Certification Group was excellent. They were incredibly helpful in preparing our team for success. As a small business, the option for a virtual assessment made the process financially feasible and seamless, assuring we achieved third-party declaration efficiently. And to conclude, I'd like to share a brief clip from Chad Colwell of Whole Foods and Justin Drury, co-founder of Spicy Mo's. Spicy Mo's was one of the first companies to be assessed through this verification program.
Whole Foods has a strong culture in helping to give those small suppliers opportunities to move into the retail space when they see there's a good fit. The most important thing is that the leadership within that small company, you know, makes this a priority and determines that a food safety culture is going to be a central part of their company.
The peace of mind knowing that my team is trained, knows what they're doing, they're following the procedures and they're following the food safety plan, and being able to have that in place and know that our customers are safe and the end user consumers are safe. That's huge. You know, I could sleep at night better for sure.
Excellent. Well, I believe that we're now ready for your questions, and we have a few in the system. Colin, would you take the lead with the questions that we have thus far?
Sure, yeah. So I have the EAGLE team with me, and we've gone on this journey for, as I say, about 9 months now. So it'd be good to get some insights from the team first. And then as we're doing that, please put your questions in the Q&A, and then we'll answer the questions. So John will ask us the questions and facilitate that side of things. So Jess, I just want to bring you in as our Chief Program Officer. You're responsible for developing these programs. So can you tell me what it's like to go through the whole change management process, introduce a new product like FVA, and what was your experience with this?
Sure, yeah, there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes when we go to launch a new product. At EAGLE, we have a process that provides the framework for all the key considerations we need to make while we're implementing the process. So it starts from a cross-functional team to make sure we have representation from all of our different departments. And then it goes all the way through monitoring with our internal audit process to ensure once we got the program in place that we're monitoring it and keeping aware of what needs to be done. So for EAGLE, our product is a service. Our service is delivered by our auditors and assessors. And so they're kind of like our machinery and equipment if we were making a product. So one of the big areas we have to consider is our auditor resources and our staff resources. How many do we need? Do they have the right competencies? How much are they going to cost? What's their availability? And then looking at, do we already have them? Can we develop them? How long would it take to develop them? And then looking at our staff resources the same way. So once we identify those, there's a lot of pieces into the training and reoccurring training. So we stay current with the industry, with the standard, and make sure that we've got relevant resources to deliver those products. So resources is really huge for us in the implementation of a new product. And if we can get the resources right, the process usually goes a lot more smooth.
Great, Jess. So yeah, just to re-emphasize to anyone looking in behind the scenes, a big effort goes in, and Jess, thanks for all your efforts to get this program up and running behind the scenes. So based on that, tell me how things are progressing now. What clients are moving from basic to intermediate? Where are our main sites being assessed around the world? What are the common reasons for clients not moving forward? What categories are popular for this program? And maybe tell us a little bit more about a very small business. How many employees are we talking about here?
Sure, yeah, I've got some basic stats I can share with you. So we are progressing. We've executed over 30 assessments since we launched it. Most of those sites are in the US and Canada. We've seen a variety of scopes, but it's been pretty heavy in dairy with cheeses, confectionaries with chocolates, some snack foods in the bakery sector. Most of these companies are having 5 or less employees. The pilot sites that we did are coming up on their second assessment. So we've seen some upgrade from basics to intermediate. I really expect to see a lot more of that in the coming year as people are getting more familiar with the requirements and what's expected, as well as the volume that's increasing. Most of the companies do move forward when they reach out to investigate. The reasons they may not is typically because they can't justify the cost with the sales for the need for the declaration letter right now. But in general, I think it's going pretty good. I think we've seen a steady interest. For me personally, I've participated in some of the assessments. I've had the ability to talk to some of the users. They all show a real commitment to the program, a real interest in wanting to know what they can do best to improve their food safety plan. And they have a lot of eagerness and enthusiasm around it. So their enthusiasm excites me. Their commitment to the program excites me. And I'm really looking forward to see what happens with both the program and the clients that are currently using it and where it might take them.
Yes, that's really good. And I think you touch upon that enthusiasm, because we're working with these innovative companies, very entrepreneurial at the beginning of their journey. So we find that they're very open and transparent during the whole process with us during the assessment. And they tend to grow definitely as they get more of an understanding of the SQF fundamentals. So really good. Glad to hear things are progressing well and we're making some good progress with this. So Kayla, I just wanted to come over to you as our Senior Business Development Manager. And you are dealing and interacting with a lot of these new clients that's coming on for EAGLE. Maybe from the retailer perspective, can you tell us how we tailor the requirements for a retailer and how retailers might have different needs in their verification programs?
Sure, great question. So for facilities, they do have the option through the SQF FVA program to choose whether or not they would like to do basic or intermediate requirements. However, of course, with everything, right, you want to consider your customer requirements. So different retailers may have different expectations for the program based on their approved supplier programs. So some things that these retailers may be taking into account are things like the size of your business, maybe any assessment or audit history that you've had, maybe your risk of product or categorization of your product, etc. So for Whole Foods in this example, they may have specific requirements based on those items on whether or not you can do basic or intermediate for the FVA program.
Kayla, that's really good to know. So if we have any retailers watching today, just understand that we can tailor. Obviously, the SQF requirements are not tailored, but how you execute in terms of using the intermediate or the basic set of requirements is really good. And I think that's why we partner with organizations like SQF, because it's a step-by-step process. And some organizations may start with the basic requirements, but most will go on that journey, basic to intermediate to ultimately the SQF certification as they scale as a company. So thanks for that. And then Kayla, so you interact with a lot of these suppliers and you have a lot of discussions about what does a qualified facility mean. So they sometimes are curious or need to fully understand that before they sign up for the assessment. Maybe you can just expand on what you've seen with that and how would you see a good way to explain the qualified requirements for a facility?
Yes, so that is actually the first thing typically we talk about when talking with customers that may be interested in this program. What SQF has chosen to do is utilize the definition of FDA from the FDA for a very small business. So what that means is, as a company, the business has to have under $1 million of product and sales on average annually. And one thing, as we consider the different areas this program may be used in, we want to consider the market average as well with that. So for example, as Jess and Colin mentioned before, we've had some of these assessments occur in the United States and Canada. So we want to take into account those different market equivalents and averages. And then as long as they meet those requirements, right, they can participate in the SQF FVA program. And they're able to, as long as your retailers allow you to, they're able to participate in this program as long as they meet that qualification of the under $1 million.
Great. Thanks, Kayla. So I think that's an important one. So if you're a small supplier looking at this program, it's good to understand your eligibility. And that's really important. And that's not defined by EAGLE or SQF. That's really to meet the FDA requirements. And it allows some exemptions. So it does allow some flexibility around some exemptions in terms of what's expected for supplier verification. Thanks, Kayla. And now, Chris, I'd like to turn to you as our Senior Certification Manager. Can you tell us a little bit more about assessor qualifications? How do we onboard an assessor to be qualified and be able to do this program with our clients?
Certainly. In order to be a qualified assessor for the SQF Fundamentals Verification Assessment, the individual must be an SQF certified auditor with a minimum of 5 years of experience in auditing SQF systems with the appropriate food sector categories aligning with the facility's scope of production. Observe a remote assessment and demonstrate their ability to assess the facility by being witnessed by an approved SQF witness auditor.
No, Chris, that's great. Thanks for that. And I think that's really important for the audience because this program is taken very, very seriously. And to go in and to be able to assess a small business is the qualification, someone that has a track record of SQF lead auditor, plus the 5 years experience really emphasizes that this program is not taken lightly. And obviously with safe food at stake, nor should it be. So great. Thanks for that. And then my other question for you, Chris, is really, can you tell me about some of the common challenges that we face or the clients face with starting with this program?
We believe the most common challenge is client preparedness. Facilities typically do not take the time to prepare themselves prior to the assessment by ensuring that they have all the documentation needed to provide the assessor 2 weeks prior to the virtual assessment. Facilities have to remember that this is part of the cost savings of the program and that the assessor has a chance to become familiar with the facility's processes before they get to the virtual session. This also means that the facility is making sure that they have a strong internal audit prior to the assessment. And doing this, it demonstrates that the facility embraces continuous improvement, which is one of the main driving points of the program. Facilities are not putting enough information as to why they are compliant to section elements. They cannot just say that they are compliant. They need to provide the supporting evidence as to why they are compliant. For example, if they have a procedure written, where is the location of the procedure in the documentation they have provided? If the code says shall be documented, it means that there is a procedure written and in place. The assessor uses the self-assessment that the facility fills out in order to review compliance and prepare for the virtual assessment. If the assessor does not have enough information in the self-assessment provided to them, they will have to spend more time doing the virtual assessment. When sharing documents with the assessor, ensuring that the files are organized and properly labeled so that the assessor can use the self-assessment to help find documentation provided.
Great. I think that's probably a very important one for the audience today to understand that preparedness. There's a saying, failure to prepare, prepared to fail. And ultimately, that's our responsibility as the third-party verifier in this case, is to take that very seriously. So the successful organizations that get through this are probably the ones that's most prepared. And that's the old adage in most things in life. But it's key to note that the assessor, if there is insufficient information or if there's a belief that the organization isn't fully prepared or is not has the right interpretation of the SQF fundamentals, then the next step in most cases would be a request to do an on-site GMP. So that's the safety net, or almost the consequence of not passing or getting through this program. So preparedness is critical. So thanks, Chris. And then my next question for you is, tell me about setting expectations, helping the client understand a virtual tour, because we've said this, and virtual assessments always have a lot of question marks, is how can we do a tour of the facility, in this case virtually. So maybe give us a few words how we set that expectation that they need to do that as part of this assessment.
Having the assessment performed virtually is part of the cost savings of the program. The facility does not have to incur the travel costs for the assessor. Prior to the virtual assessment, the facility will have a phone call with the assessor in order for the assessor to get to know the facility, answer any questions the facility might have, and to work out the remote assessment details. The facility will share the method in which it wishes to share documentation with the assessor, the virtual platform the facility wishes to use for the video conference, whether it be platforms like Zoom or Microsoft Teams. The facilities must have the capability to perform the assessment virtually, which means that someone on the facility will be using a device like a cell phone or tablet that will be able to have signal throughout the facility, as the assessor will need to be able to view the entire facility virtually. The assessment is an average of 5.5 hours and will have an opening and closing meeting with the facility. At the time of the virtual assessment, the assessor may have follow-up questions for the facility to answer based on the documentation that the facility has provided to the assessor. The assessor must be able to view the facility's production in order to verify its processes are effective. Because there are a good amount of facilities in this program that are one-man operations, the facility should find someone that would be able to hold the camera for them so they can show each step of production.
That's great, Chris, and I think that's important and hopefully reassuring to the audience that the virtual tour is critical for this assessment. Like John, I've had the pleasure to observe some of these assessments, and I've seen the assessor go through with the site. The site does the virtual tour with either a tablet, sometimes a phone, and with that mobile device, they can get really into pieces of equipment, under pieces of equipment. They can show issues with, it could be anything from ceilings to sealed doors, to checking temperature records on equipment, refrigeration, all these kind of things. So a lot comes out of that virtual tour, and ultimately the technology is critical. So I think the other message is to an organization going through this, a small business, is because of that virtual tour, you cannot have spotty Wi-Fi at one end of the facility where the signal may drop and so on. That's going to really impact the assessment and the virtual tour. We've talked about technologies now as like Wi-Fi mesh booster systems, so you can make sure your Wi-Fi signal is consistent and good throughout the facility, because we do look and we do spend a long time going through that with the organization. And in addition to live feeds, there may be some supporting video as well in terms of production runs and so on. So I think the virtual side of things and the technology we have today is only going to get better. So whilst there may be some comparisons made to a real on-site audit where people talk about the sniff test and you can really smell the environment and so on, whilst a virtual tour will never beat that, it does go a long way in terms of a remote assessment to give us the right level of confidence during that assessment. And then last but not least, Chris, what's the common NCRs? What are we seeing across the program that's maybe worth talking about for the non-conformity side of things?
Module 2 is where there are the most common NCRs. Module 2 is a series of elements within the code that describe essential requirements to build a robust food safety management system. I would say that there's a pretty good spread of NCRs throughout this module. If the facility does not have a documented procedure and proof that a program has been implemented, it is a major nonconformance. One of the major hangups for facilities is the facility having a regulatory inspection report, whether it be from the FDA, Department of Ag, Department of Health, so on and so forth. If the facility does not have evidence of this, it's a major nonconformance. We understand that a regulatory report might not be able to be provided because some states do not provide a report. However, the facility must be able to show some sort of evidence that this took place, like emails or letters.
Now that's great, Chris. We find that these very small businesses, they will start with a state inspection before they even have a third-party assessment. So they may only be more familiar with an inspection rather than an assessment or an audit. But that's an important piece for this assessment to understand that they are up and running as a food safety operator, and from a regulatory perspective, they're allowed to produce and distribute safe food. So great, Chris. Really appreciate your input there. Kayla, thanks for yours, and Jess, thanks for yours. And now hopefully we'll set the scene. I think there's some questions coming in, and we're open to the audience.
There is. Thanks so much, Colin. A couple questions. First off, and we did answer this in the presentation, but I think it's important to really clarify because it is very complicated. What is the annual revenue and inventory limits on this program? So just to clarify, it's the FDA definition of a qualified facility can be somewhat complicated. I found a 15-page guidance document from the FDA on that definition, just as an example. But in short, less than $1 million of a 3-year average of revenue plus the value of inventory. There's also in the definition, less than $500,000 of revenue excluding inventory is also a consideration as well. Next question. Can the SQF FVA declaration be used on the company's website? Colin, which from your team? I haven't come across this, so I would assume so, but forgive me for my ignorance.
So yes, good question. We see some clients putting their SQF certificate on their website and making that transparent. So there's no harm to do the same for the declaration. You can promote that you have taken the right steps with credible organizations, third-party verification. And that could be a selling point, especially if you're a small business looking to work with retailers such as Whole Foods.
Right. Next question. Would the small business need to rerun a SQF Fundamentals or Edition 9, our standard GFSI-based audit, at a later point of time? Would the assessment take a shorter time frame cost if they had pre-done an FVA?
So in this case, if they were upgrading from SQF FVA to a full SQF Fundamentals audit or the SQF manufacturing GFSI recognized scheme, the FVA would be a contributor. It would be a formal record to show that they've done that. But like with all of these programs, these are annual requirements. So the FVA is based on the organization completing an annual self-assessment or internal audit. So by the time, if an organization wanted to stay with FVA and a remote assessment, they would have to do a new self-assessment because it's an annual task. Or if they were upgrading to a SQF Fundamentals audit or an SQF manufacturing GFSI recognized audit, again, they would have to repeat that exercise because it's an annual task. It's a requirement for all of those programs that the organization has at a minimum a internal audit once a year, or in the case of FVA, it could be a self-assessment because they're a very small business and they may not have a internal ability to do a full internal audit.
That's great. Yeah, just to highlight on Colin's comments, I mean, I think the intention of this program is to help build stepping stones to lay a solid foundation for growth in a company's food safety program, to where going from fundamentals to the Fundamentals Verification Assessment to a full fundamentals audit, and then ultimately to achieve that GFSI level food safety certification audit, which is effectively the gold standard in food safety worldwide these days. All right, next question. Are many retailers aware of the FVA?
Yes. So in terms of the retailers in North America, the SQF is part of FMI, the Food Marketing Institute. So all of the retailers part of FMI have been notified about this program. In addition, EAGLE has taken the time to write to all of those retailers to explain that program's there and available. So I would say retailers in North America, yes. Potentially retailers in other regions and parts of the world may be learning about this for the first time. But the key thing it's more than applicable for other retailers in other parts of the world if it meets their local regulatory requirements. We've talked about here the FDA definition of a very small business. These are the things that as a retailer they would need to see whether there are similar exemptions for very small businesses in their region or country.
What a great lead up to the next question. Is FVA implemented outside of the USA? And so I can see that question coming from the perspective of foreign suppliers bringing products into the United States or producers supplying their own local markets. Colin, your thoughts again?
Yeah, it's in the US, it's in Canada right now. So we've made assessments for facilities in US and Canada. We have had discussions with retailers that are asking us to do this potentially in Central America. And we've had some discussions in South America with some government institutions that are interested to apply this to help small businesses in remote areas. So the answer is North America. But also the answer is there is scope for this to be applied globally, depending on the regulatory framework that's in the market, depending on the, ultimately it's the retailer that will make the decision whether they would like to use this in their supplier verification program or not.
Right. Excellent. Next question. The money question. What's the average cost?
I can answer that one again. I'm not going to give out the specific details because that would be on a quote by quote basis with our clients. But what I would say, it's about a third of the cost of a one-day GMP audit in the US, where an auditor would have to travel. Typically in the US, it's a flight, it's a rental car, it's a hotel stay, maybe 1 or 2 nights. It's a big chunk of time allocated to the audit report write-up. And if you imagine taking those costs out, and it's actually a half-day activity without a full audit report, without the travel, it's about a third of the cost. So whatever you're paying today for a one-day on-site audit in the US, you're probably, it will be about a third of that cost.
Great. We have another question about the viability of this program in sub-Saharan Africa. I believe that Colin's already addressed that with the previous question. So well, hopefully if whoever posed that question, if you'd like to discuss that further, feel free to reach out to me directly. But moving on to the next question, is the FVA report based on a pass-fail scoring method? And is there a reassessment included if fail?
I'll hand that over to the team.
Yes, so just like the SQF Fundamentals program, it is based on a pass-fail rating. It's not scored like an SQF GFSI benchmarked program, such as food safety. For the reassessment, with any type of food safety program, right, we would want to, as a certification body, make sure that you guys take some time, right, to work on your programs, right, make updates to your system, and really use that first FVA audit or assessment as a learning opportunity, right, of what is expected. And then from there, then we could talk about a reassessment in the future. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Well, those are the questions that we have in queue. I'd like to just take a moment for any last minute questions to come through. All right, not seeing any of those. Moving along, next steps. What does it look like to get started?
So to get started on the Eagle side is feel free, if you're a very small business, is reach out to ourselves and we can confirm eligibility for the program. The key thing as well is ultimately, if you have a retailer as a customer, is to make sure that they're willing and have this as part of their supplier verification program as well. We don't want to do this assessment and it's not going to help the supplier. So we'll have that discussion with you if anyone reaches out. So the next thing is download the requirements and look at the guidance and see whether it fits your operation. These requirements, the SQF Fundamentals, are brand new to a lot of companies, and that takes time to be prepared with, download and understand the requirements, do the self-assessment and so on. Explore training options. So there are many independent training organizations out there that's qualified to train for SQF. You may need some training to do that. And then the next step is to conduct your internal audit, your self-assessment against the SQF Fundamentals Verification Code. Once that's been done, you as an organization are accountable and responsible for closing out those gaps that's been identified in your food safety system. So once you've completed that whole cycle for your internal audit or self-assessment, that's when EAGLE would come in. So schedule and complete the self-assessment with EAGLE. As I mentioned before, in terms of the program, that's a 4 to 6 hour assessment of a free phone call, a documentation review, and then a virtual tour and all that fun stuff. So these requirements here are downloadable from this slide, but also from the SQF website. And then that's it. Here you'll receive the deck. Everyone that's joined today will receive this if you're watching the recording. Here's the ability to contact EAGLE for a quote, and we'll be more than happy to have a conversation with you. And there might be a good conversation to be had, and Kayla will be possibly the person you'll be talking to about this.
Great. Thank you so much, Colin. And thank you to the EAGLE team for their insights and their expertise in helping to grow and develop this program. As I mentioned before, I am personally very excited about this program and the potential to help those very, very small businesses, grow and get onto retailer shelves, and then become the next, Dave's Killer Bread or Perfect Foods Bar or whatever that might look like. Once again, on behalf of SQF, thank you all for attending. We greatly appreciate it and look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Have a great day.